So, chairing this panel, he's a second-generation pharmacist. He is also a fellow of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain and superintendent of a multi-award-winning pharmacy group. He's worked with GPs and primary care for over 35 years, with 4 years at the Council of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. Most of you will know him as the pharmacist who gave up drugs, but please put your hands together for the Vice Chair of Trustees for the Public Health Collaboration, Graham Phillips.
It doesn't get much better than that. Thank you, Sam. As the pharmacist that gave up drugs, I kind of feel that I should start with an apology. When David put up those slides of the kind of Wild West that's out there with the GLP-1s, he was kind enough not to point out that most of these are coming from my colleagues. But I'm going to be honest, I'm highly embarrassed with what's going on out there. I think in the long term it's going to come and bite us all in the bum. It's not just pharmacists, but I reckon we're 80% guilty, and I'm on various pharmacy groups, and I'm always haranguing them about, our behaviour. Are we making a quick buck here, or are we going to do more harm than good and destroy our reputation? So it's not quite as bad as the States, as what you put up there. We're no longer selling cigarettes and things like that. But yeah, on behalf of my profession, an apology. Okay, who here has tried them? Who's prepared to be honest and put their hands up and say, I've tried them? Not very many. Anyone on the panel? Interesting. Either that or you're not being entirely honest. Anyone looked at Elon Musk's face recently?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Have you looked at the shape of his face? He looks like some kind of something out of Star Wars or a Klingon. Classic example of a Ozempic face, right? He's catabolized the muscle in his face with the Ozempic. What David was talking about.
He was always posting about donuts, so it's
yeah.
kind of partly why I'm sure he's got on his index.
He's clearly got his issues, and I speak as a Tesla driver, so you can all give me hate mail afterwards. Ozempic butt. Has anyone heard of Ozempic butt? It's a huge deal in the States. People are catabolizing the large muscles in their body because they're not taking nutrition. It's exactly the point that you made, Eric. Is this about weight loss? Is it about calories? Is it about nutrition? Anyone here a fan of Novo Nordisk? One of the big manufacturers. Did you know they got kicked out of the ABPI, the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry? Right? Now, the ABPI is a kind of, it claims to be a self-regulating industry, right? Literally marking their homework. How bloody naughty do you have to be big pharma and to be kicked out of your own club? It's not looking good, is it? I was very antipathetic towards the whole thing, actually, until I saw Mark's presentation. He only gave you like 20% of it here, but it is online, and I hope we can link to it afterwards. It's an absolutely brilliant presentation. I hope, Mark, at some point you'll talk about some of the results you're getting with the GLPs. So it's not all bad news. Okay, so one of my consistent expectations when I go to conferences, the time for audience participation is always very limited. The person who's chairing with their big ego talks far too much, and then the people on the stage, and then we all lose sight of it. You get 10 minutes and you end up in frustration. So we're not going to do that here. There's a mic here, and there's a mic over there. And I want to hear your questions primarily. We've got also some coming in through the app, which I think Olivia's going to flag at me, and I've got a few in reserve. So if anyone has a question to ask, don't be shy. Come and stand at the mic, either side, and we'll gradually work our way through them. But there's one caveat. You get 30 seconds, right? We don't want a speech. We want you get 30 seconds in. There has to be a question mark, not a question at the end of this, not a vague inflection. And I see we already have one willing customer. Steve.
Just to start off. Is there a danger, certainly with the youngsters, that if there is a pill to fix the food that they're eating, that we're going to drive more food addiction because there's a pill to fix the issue? Question.
Great question. Who wants to talk about that? Jen?
Is it working? Yes. Yes. I think that is a problem because ultra-processed foods are addictive. Nobody wants to give them up. And people don't know about food addiction, so they don't understand that they're addicted. So I think there is definitely a danger, not just the young people, but the entire population, not understanding that the fundamental problem is an addiction problem. And of course, the GLP-1s do mask that for a while, but unless it's part of a treatment program, then it's not a long-term solution, and they're losing muscle, and there's all those other risks. So I would say yes.
I'll just quickly clarify why I asked the question. School car park, nice school, talking to mums and dads about, because they can ask me about food. Don't worry about it, Steve. There's an injection now that can have if there's a problem.
And that's because we're not having the balanced debate about the pros and cons.
I think there'll definitely be more prevalence in food addiction if we're going to mask it with these medications, especially in the youngsters when their brain's still developing. They're going to end up with more and more exposure to it, become more chronically addicted when they're older as well. But
That segues actually quite nicely into a question that I already had here. Ellen, Jen. Do you see a role for the GLPs in food addiction as an adjunct, and have you any experience?
I haven't got any experience other than through. We do discuss it a lot. Obviously, we discuss cases, and that the patient that David described, who was so terrified at the idea of abstinence, he just ate more. He just was panicked into eating more, and just the thought of giving up those foods. So I think for some people initially to get the quietening of the food noise, which is constant, utterly constant for some people, to give them the space, to get the education, to change the diet, and then this, what's it called? Off-boarding, off-ramping, at the right point. So you're thinking of it sort of a bit like methadone is to heroin, really. It's that idea of you're helping people to get to the point where they've got the mental capacity to do something different, support them to do that thing, and then at the right moment support them in coming off that as well.
I had another case. I've got the patient's permission to tell you this. So this is a gentleman who owns a business, and his wife said to me, he's so addicted to bread that she's been putting liquid detergent on any crusts that she puts in the bin. But then she said, liquid detergent isn't enough to stop him from eating bread in the night. The only thing that works is spray bleach. And you see, I think this case, if you're not a food addict, this case for me helped me understand how desperate somebody may be. And this person has very poorly controlled diabetes, so it's a disaster. And in that case, the help that the GLP-1 gave was the only thing I could do. That's how bad he was. But again, it's the mixing of the GLP-1 with the support and the appropriate, it's support, and it is worrying that the pharmacist, it was kind of you to mention that, because it sticks out, doesn't it? as a real worry. So this gentleman was really kind, said I could tell this story because you immediately get food addiction. How serious must it be? Only bleach will stop him.
Dave, just before we move on, that patient you're talking about, what was the outcome? Did it solve the problem?
Yes, the outcome is good. So I can share, he's now got the best diabetic control for 5 years. So that's really good. And for him, he's proud and has a sense of control, which he'd never had. So it has ended well. Thank you.
Well, I consulted my Bible on nutrition, low-carb nutrition, and I wish every department chair, clinic in the world would have a copy of this. I sent it to my department chair as, cover, so that this is science. And I noticed the next edition should have more. Prof. Oaks, are you listening? We need a pediatrics part to this book, and we need more on sugar and ultra-processed food addiction for the next edition. But please, buy one, send it to your doctor, your academic program. It's wonderful, and yeah, we all contributed to it as well. But I'm sorry, that wasn't being humble. Okay. But I just have to say, David, that sarcasm doesn't work in the office so well in the U.S. But anyway, and do you have chaffles? Have you made a chaffle? Yeah. Chaffle? Yeah. So,
explain what chaffles are.
Well, so for those of you who are bread addicted, there's a wonderful invention. It's a waffle, but it's made out of eggs and cheese. So, well, that's not a waffle. Yes, it is a waffle. It's just the batter is different. And so look it up online, chaffle, and that's what I use as a substitution for the carb bread addiction. So
you're so right, Eric. When our grandchildren stay, Karen and I determined not to make the same mistake that we made with our children, with our grandchildren. So when the grandchildren come to stay, that's what they get offered. And the parents say they're never going to eat it. Do you know what? Not a problem when they're with us. So yeah, highly recommend chaffles. Yeah.
Just those that have got ultra-processed food addiction, sometimes substituting with these keto products or these low-carb substitutes can be just as hard, yeah.
We were just looking at each other going like, yes, chaffles for some people, but Ellen and I couldn't have chaffles. I'd just eat 10 of them with butter on.
Well, you can't do that.
Yeah, but I would.
That was sarcasm. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to make a just super quick comment on the addiction, but on what Steve was saying. So I think we need to completely shut down, that's like the straw man argument that the medications are permission to eat less of the same crap is we just need, that's just a media thing, right? Because anyone practicing medicine like that, that doesn't even come up, right? The basis, the terrain of all this is, and it's not just food, is you've got to restore all the stuff, sleep, stress. We need to create healthy metabolic humans, and the med can help, right? If anyone is giving this out with that advice, or you're hearing that on the news, that's just, it's null. It's called a straw man argument. None of us are arguing that is true. That's just, it's not real. The addiction thing is crazy, and again, individual results may vary, right? Isn't that how everything is? So I had a patient, and if Sam can share my slides, a case study, lost 100 pounds, came off Suboxone on low-dose GLP-1, and that came off Suboxone. That's for opiate addiction. And he actually wrote his little narrative. He said, I went into a Denny's, and I usually have two. Denny's are these big breakfast places in America, and it's called the Graham Slam. He says he usually eats two, and he finished half of one, and he had to box the rest up. And he was like, wait. And yeah, and he's actually doing well. He's eating high protein. He's doing all this stuff, but he's like, something was hit with that, and that's not all. And he wasn't diabetic, right? So he was kind of metabolically healthy, obese. So individual, like sometimes it's the Hail Mary pass that you would do in American football. We call that.
Did you want to?
Yeah, so with the GLP-1s and food addiction, if people are really struggling after they've learnt the science and they are struggling to remain abstinent and relapsing frequently, I think they could be used as a tool, but they need to have that education alongside with it. It needs to be an MDT approach, especially if we're talking about that the dose has got to keep going up, but rather perhaps prescribing it with the idea of weaning off to help them with that education side. Get form habits, do the behavioural change techniques so that they're ingrained. I think it could be quite a useful tool.
Okay, so the mics, we're collecting at the mics. I'm not going to adjudicate. If you can just alternate as you go.
Yeah.
We'll start with you, Ian. And,
Thank you.
Just take it in turns.
Yeah. So I'll be very quick. I went to my local hospital for a diabetes check last month, and half of my staff who were looking after me had obesity problems. They were giving me advice such as, oh, if you want to make a cake, use brown flour instead of white flour and probably add some porridge oats. And then I wandered down to the shop to get even more cross, and there's nothing in the hospital shop that I could eat apart from some plastic little bits of cheese and some nuts. Now, I've had run-ins and run-ins with the local hospital management saying, what on earth's going on? Ultra-processed food, we're starting to realise is an addictive, harmful substance. So why are we selling it in a hospital? And because patients will take the example of that and say, oh, if the doctors are eating it, it must be okay. And how do you think we can get around that problem? Because I've had no luck at all, and I've got to the stage now where I'm asking my hospital staff to bring back an off-licence and cigarettes because those people are being discriminated against.
So it's a great point that you make here, and you know, when we had the Olympics here, sponsored by McDonald's, right? What I do, whenever I go, even the local cancer hospital, I mean the big cancer hospital in London, it's just a marketing opportunity for processed food. I tell you, I too take photos and I tweet the hospital, and I guess if we all did that, you know, I think they will respond to social pressure. There is some kind of policy, if I know NHS England is going, but there is some kind of policy on this. And there are some hospitals and some trusts where they've reversed this. So it's not, in my local hospital, it's terrible. Watford General, absolute disaster. Barnet, even worse. But there are hospitals that are starting to respond to this. So I think Ian makes a really profound point, and I think all of us here have got an opportunity and an obligation to raise it wherever we can.
I say just a little bit of success. My colleague got the Duke University Hospital to take sugar sodas out of the vending machines. So you can do that. But of course there's still juice in the vending machine. But it's just so baby steps, perhaps.
Hi, thank you very much for all the wonderful talks.
Just introduce yourself quickly.
I'm Dr. Shide Puria. I'm a medical practitioner. What I wanted to ask you was, there's obviously a big component here that we've not discussed, and that's the microbiome and what impact the sugars have on the microbiome in generating toxic alcohols, which in turn also generates addictions. So with those heavily addicted patients, would you consider treating the fermented species that chronic sugar intake creates with antifungal medications, for example?
So the writer who helped me write my latest book, Amy Berger, brilliant, has her own internet services. We joked when we were writing the book, not the microbiome, not again. What a distraction. So 30 years ago, we never talked about the microbiome, and this worked great. So there are others here who are in clinics measuring for SIBO in clinic, and I just have to say that if you get the carbs low enough, it's not an issue.
It is for a lot of people, and they actually need treatment with antifungals, for example.
Prove it to me. Prove it to me,
I'll write
please.
my cases up for you.
I would love it. I love being the recalcitrant professor.
Do you want to add something, Jen? No. Okay.
No, normally.
Well, I think Patrick's next then, yeah. Oh, sorry, that side. Sorry,
Okay,
apologies.
Andrew Makin, retired, if that's the right word, RN, currently working as a health coach, local GPs. Aimed at Mark originally, but then Steve kind of picked up on the same subject. I noticed, unwittingly or not, that you place patient autonomy ahead of non-maleficence. And I wonder if there's a sense in which we are a pill for every ill, pandering to patient expectations rather than making the tough decisions. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, patients always have autonomy, but we as providers should not. So if a patient says, I know this medicine can cause me harm, my BMI is 24 and I want to fit into a dress, they can choose to say, I want the medication, I know 84 patients died, but me as a provider, you know, one of my tenets of medical ethics is, again, all four have to apply, is do no harm. So if I feel I'm going to do harm, I am not going to prescribe it. So I think none of us should feel pressured to prescribe something that potentially could cause harm. I mean, we have cancer doctors here, so if we have a chemotherapy that doesn't work for that cancer and it can cause harm, but they read somewhere that it might, it's still up to us to make the right decision professionally to not do harm. So it's a discussion, and it's always a discussion, right? It's never a black or white issue. It's always a discussion, and it's an ongoing process. But I hope that kind of clarifies a little. I don't know what trumps what. I think safety always trumps a patient's choice. Right? That's why we have IRBs that govern medical research.
Ethics committees. We call them ethics committees, yeah.
So, you know, that raises a great, let's go up a level. We just watched how many studies on the GLP-1s? A dozen? 2 dozen? 3 dozen? It was Fiona Godley, past editor of the BMJ in the movie First Do No Pharm, P-H-A-R-M, who said, and it just echoes in my mind, the drug companies could be studying the usual care, or they could be studying the best alternative care, and they're not. So if 10%, if 2 of these 50 studies up here had included the usual care, well, there was one with insulin, that's not the best. So use low-carb keto or low glycemic or something as a control group in a clinical trial that pharma has to include. So Fiona Godley is interviewed basically saying, we've tried to get the statin companies to show their data. We've tried, you know, and she said they've only really cared about a placebo-controlled trial because all they cared about was the drug. So if you include the ethics of being a medical doctor, you use the best control group. Look at the studies we did with low carb. It was low carb versus low fat. And I ended up saying, you know, they both work, but low carb was better. We weren't trying to show that versus placebo. So it's unethical for a company to just do a study with a placebo control that doesn't have a best usual care arm. How's that for another, raising the level of ethics here? Thank you.
We might go into the details of how all these studies are funded and how studies get buried, but that's probably a discussion for another day, unless someone wants to raise it. Jen, you're just holding the mic. Patrick.
Yes, Patrick Holford. I'd be interested in anyone's comments or views on allulose and its effects on GLP-1, seemingly without the same profile of adverse effects.
Do you want to just give a bit more background, because people in this room may not be so aware of allulose, Patrick?
Well, it's a natural sugar, and although it's a bit limited in human trials, the animal trials are showing pretty much the same, not scale, but profile of metabolic benefits, but without the adverse effects. Personally, I've been a tremendous fan of glucomannan for reducing, appetite, increasing fiber, microbiome effects, etc. So I'm very interested in assisting, eating problems with glucomannan, and now also potentially with allulose.
So I would love to see the companies that are making allulose do studies in clinical populations have them do 50 people over 6 months, publish in the journal, and I'll comment on it.
Yeah, I sit on Allulose's scientific advisory, and so Ben Bickman has done some preliminary animal research on allulose and GLP-1 effect, but as we know, none of that can really transfer directly now. I think for diabetes patients, I don't know if Ian's tried it, if you're a type 1 and you bake and you use allulose, it's pretty flat line. It is a natural sugar. It's not an artificial sweetener. So I think the evidence-based use just based on your CGM is in type 1 diabetes. And potentially type 2 also, if you like to bake, or if you're going to put it in some drink or some yogurts. It's in a lot of commercial yogurts now, but you can eat a lot of calories of allulose-loaded products, and I find that it's limited by its GI effect. So if anyone's ever tried allulose, if you have a large bolus of it, but maybe that could be a GLP. It gives a little bit of a nausea effect. But try it. I think individual results may vary, but as far as comparison to a lot of artificial sweeteners, it's probably a win because it's not an artificial product. But as far as GLP-1 and equivalent, I think unknown at this point.
So I would also add that food addicts gonna food addict, and it took me ages to quit sweeteners, did it not? Probably as long as sugar. It's really hard to quit the sweeteners if you have been using those for a while. My addict brain thought it would be a great idea when Ben Bickman said he would send me a kilogram of allulose to try, because he thought that probably it didn't have those same kind of addictive. Of course it does, because it's sweet. I started putting it in my coffee. He sent me some very tasty bars. I just ate a lot, and I won't mention who, but another well-known person in the space who's also a bit food addicty did exactly the same. Took me a little while to admit to myself that that sweetness just triggers all those old behaviors in people like us that are hardcore food addicts. So that would be my caution. I think probably there are benefits for people who are transitioning again, use it as a way to get off the sugar, but perhaps for some of us always realize that you'll have to give that up as well, just because the sweetness triggers off the old behaviors and the old cravings. I don't know.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, as you were talking about it, I was thinking about all the things that I could make again. And it's been a long time, and just thinking, I could have a sweet coffee again. And that's just sitting thinking about it, and I haven't actually had it yet. And it's been many years since I've had sweet things. So when I do have it, my brain gets very excited, and they taste super sweet. And the amount goes up and up and up.
Allulose is illegal in the UK under the Novel Foods regulation, so we can't get hold of it.
Well, you can actually buy it online, like all things. It's a scary thing, but I got mine from Ben direct, but you can. I have bought it online as well. I'm an addict.
Our audience might be less familiar with it than in the States, because there's a whole thing called grass, generally regarded as safe. In the States, we don't have that categorization, which allulose comes under. So it is an interesting product, and I would, if anyone doesn't follow Ben Bickman on this, I would, not uncritically, but it's worth having a look. I think you're relatively optimistic, Patrick, and I think you're pretty cynical about bullshit, aren't you? So that's another indication. It's not readily available, but you didn't hear this from me. But if you go onto eBay, you can get it. So,
yeah, you can. One more small.
Jen and Ellen make some really important points. So
one more small
not
point.
Not without
actually,
caution.
Which is also, so we're saying it's a natural product. I mean, we say the same about stevia, don't we? But they are natural, but they're super concentrated. So it's a bit like. Cocaine's actually a natural product because it comes from the coke, but it's super concentrated. So that's the difference. We would never come across that level of super sweet, apart from honey, in nature, and we'd have to be brave enough to stick our hands in a beehive. So even though things are natural, it's kind of ultra processed because it's been made by processing.
I'm always very suspicious over these new sugars that come out, that they've been refined somehow, some way, because even the stevia leaf it's green. If you get stevia powder, if anybody's tried proper dried stevia leaves, it's like drinking sweet cabbage water. It's horrible. But they've extracted everything else to make it white, and then it's super sweet. So I'm always very cautious about that.
For more on this, the company in the States is RX Sugar, and I'm not here to promote them, but it's worth following, I would say, and just draw your own conclusion. Okay.
Hello, I'm Sophia. Thank you for the wonderful session this morning. It was very interesting. I have one concern when I look at this data you presented, and I would like to know if you know of any accompanying data to, fill up my picture of the situation. So we have seen data on muscle loss during weight loss. I'm concerned that when people regain weight, I have not seen what happens to body composition. And what if the picture is not as positive, that they don't regain the full weight? What if it means they just don't build up the muscle they once had? So I would really be interested in more data on that side.
Just to emphasize that, so you start off 20 kilos overweight, and you're steadily gaining weight. You take whichever GLP-1, and you lose 20 kilos after 2 years. Okay, brilliant. Or a year. Another year goes by, you put 15 kilos back on. So 3 or 4 years down the line, you're still 5 kilos lighter than you started, against a scenario where you were putting weight on. So you think, okay, I'm 5 kilos less than I was 3-4 years ago, by which time I would have been 10 kilos heavier than I am. So on the face of it, that looks fantastic. But that isn't really what matters, because if at the end of the day, you're losing muscle and you're losing bone and you're replacing them with fat, you're actually getting skinny fatter, right? And if you want to kill a human being, that's a great way to do it. So I think this is a really important question, and it'd be interesting. I know, Mark, you've had quite a lot of experience on this. So to what extent, and I think I can see Eric also interested, to what extent can we use these drugs and mitigate against that loss of lean muscle and lean tissue?
So eat protein. Is that on? Eat protein. Protein comes first. We're made of protein. Can I give that message any other way? And then stress your muscles. Resistance training, aerobic training when you're losing weight. So in the medical weight loss world, we like to have the healthiest way of losing weight. The surgical weight loss world, what you're seeing is a small manifestation of what happens after you have weight loss surgery. So they lose weight so fast. Talk about Ozempic face. It's it's surgical weight loss, and some people need it. Of course, they're the highest sugar addict scores in the waiting room, waiting for weight loss surgery. So we know in that world, the muscle mass loss is the Achilles heel of surgical weight loss. And they say, I go to surgical meetings, and well, they would have died otherwise, So weight loss through weight loss surgery can be life-saving, but at what expense? Well, how much muscle mass loss? So at the GLP meetings, the world's expert, Bob Kushner in Chicago, got up and he said, I was just surprised that there was so much muscle mass loss. And we're like, Bob, it was not to be unexpected. So you have to understand who's in charge of these trials. And now, but don't worry, they're going to put a drug in the new shot to prevent the weight loss from the muscle. So they're going to take care of you, or you can eat protein. And so I'm concerned about that. But there's always a little bit of muscle mass loss with lots of weight loss. But again, the same message is protein and exercise.
Eric, have you got clinical experience of the degree to which you can mitigate that loss of lean muscle, lean tissue, using the GLPs in an appropriate way,
so
but also
practice,
doing what you said, which is lift some weights, eat protein?
In my practice, you may be surprised, I don't do DEXA scans to look at the muscle mass. I do a bioimpedance machine that's, it's okay, but it's not great. And so muscle, the amount you have and the strength you have is going to be the best indicator, not necessarily on a scale. And I've never seen a study of using different lifestyle. In fact, at that same meeting with Bob Kushner, I said, have you ever tried a low-carb diet with GLP-1s in any of these clinical trials? No. So all of these studies that you saw, the control group was low-fat diet, low-calorie diet, and whether they did it or not is another issue. They didn't force it hard. So I don't think we have great research. It's more the theory behind it, and what we learned from weight loss surgery is you don't want to lose too fast. So if you're on a medicine and you're going down 3 pounds per week, that's too fast. That you're going to be losing some muscle unless you have that. Unless you're in the U.S., it might be a bigger loss. But so in here, I guess in this context, 2 pounds per week might be too much. You can measure on the scale the muscle, but I don't do that typically.
Yeah, on that whole long list of trials there, only one of them from my reading actually looked at body comp, and that was where we got the 40%. It was like 140 patients out of they had a small subgroup in one of the select trials. But I don't think pharma is going to want to study that because they know that there is muscle mass loss. But I'd suggest if on the slides, the study that had the 0% to 40%, so common sense is not too common, but it always applies. We know from the strength training world and aging world that you need about 1.5 grams per kilo of ideal or lean body weight, and you got to lift some heavy things, right? So we know that to be true. Is that a tautology? So maybe it's a real tautology, but we know that is a tautology, but probably a truthy tautology. There could be exceptions to that. The other thing is the bone loss. So bone loss also plays into the lean body mass. But there was a study a couple weeks ago that showed bariatric surgery versus GLP-1. Bariatric surgery had actually more bone loss. So like, but again, how do we keep our bone strength, right? We got to keep muscle strength. We got to keep weight-bearing exercise. So it all comes down to supporting the terrain, which I have in that one-page handout. Like, these are non-negotiables, and you can't do like 3 out of 5 of them. Like, you got to do the whole thing, but people want that advice, right? Like, if you're going to be well, right, this is what you got to do. Are you in? Do you want to go to work? Yeah, I'm in, and we'll help you go to work. But that's just being honest with that informed consent, shared decision making. This is honestly what we need to tell people. These are the side effects of the chemotherapy, right? Like, we would never give someone a chemotherapy drug without telling them all the horrible side effects and the potential benefits. But we have to be absolutely accurate and truthful in that sharing. But there's unknown unknowns, right? In 5 years, we might know a lot more, I hope. Because I'm not an expert either in this stuff, right? This is all novel at these high doses.
Yeah. Did you want to come back?
No, thank you. I agree with everything. I think that you can use medications, and under the proper nutrition and exercise, you will mitigate this muscle loss. Just the point that I wanted to make is really that when we look at the data and they show that people didn't regain all the weight, what if
most of that's fat? So yes,
regain,
absolutely, because
right?
it's hard to regain muscle. Right. They're regaining fat. I mean, we don't know that for sure, but I think you can make that fair assumption because the muscle does not go back up unless you're taking steroids. Does anyone else know how to gain muscle that quick?
And so they will not study that for sure, right? Because if you show a body composition at the end, that would be
more fat.
And now they want to show that, of course, even after stopping medication, you're better off than you were before. Are you, though? So, yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you. It was so great.
Okay. Thank you. Joe Hennessy, mostly retired GP from Ireland. The same way as the smoking companies were pressured eventually by legal cases, I'm wondering, is there a legal case here? Eric mentioned that he worked on the FDA committees dealing with some of that. And I understand they transitioned their investments into oil and big ag and big farm. And could they now be pushed into big keto, maybe delicious keto without sugars, or longevity drugs or whatever? Thank you.
Well, as far as I understand it, the good news is there is a big case in the States where somebody is saying, well, I developed type 2 diabetes when I was 15 years old, and the companies manufacturing the ultra-processed food were known. They knew it was addictive. And they And they advertised it to children, they added in the little plastic things, and that there is a case going through right now that I'm pinning my hopes on, because if it goes well, imagine what that would do. Imagine how many, because I've waited in the UK and waited thinking sooner or later somebody's going to have to do this. Hooray, it's happening in the States right now.
Excellent. Thank you.
And it's definitely the case that big tobacco ended up buying big food. And it's the same playbook. But no one knows that.
Thank you.
Ali.
Thanks for your great and nuanced talks. Yeah, I'm Ali Houston. I'm kind of interested mainly in metabolic psychiatry. And so the big stat that came out of your talk, David, was that associationally, admittedly, there seems to be like a 2 times association with depression in people using GLP-1s. What on earth do you think is going on there?
I've got a thought, and it's a bit like when people have the weight loss surgery. Some people are using food as a way to manage their emotions or past traumas or whatever it is, and when you take that away, either surgically or with these high doses of drugs making them feel unwell, that destabilizes them mentally, partly. So that's more of a psychological explanation, and you do see that in weight loss surgery. It's a risk that people become depressed or they start drinking alcohol to get that same effect. So that's just one possible mechanism.
No, that's right.
There are a lot of things that we learn through science after someone has experienced it for years, and it's kind of funny to me that I was involved with a study where they looked at fMRI, rapid brain activity, and asked people to look at pictures that made them crave cigarettes and wanted them, and guess what? There was activity in the brain. It's like, well, but you could have just talked to them, right? So if you eat a big meal, big holiday meal, like taking a GLP-1, that's the hormone that comes out of your stomach after a big meal. What do you want to do after a big meal, holiday meal? Nothing. Lie down. Food isn't tasty anymore. So that, you're going to see that effect all over the body. And, maybe you just watch more football or more rugby or whatever, soccer? No, wrong. Yeah, right. That's an American thing, sorry. Well, so I'm not surprised that some people will be depressed or just don't want to do anything because you're getting higher doses of these now. And so my concern is that if you use this at higher doses, are you manipulating and causing some kind of irreparable harm or long-term lasting effect? And it's starting to bubble up with the long-term gastroparesis that some people are having from the shots. But I think you can just when you have a big meal, remember that's right, we're not eating carbs. You may not remember that feeling of wanting to just sleep. Okay, that's supposed to be funny, but anyway. So I think it's a matter of time when the science says, hey, that fMRI shows more depression after GLP-1s in a selected group. We see that already.
Have you got further thoughts on that, Ali?
Not really. I suppose it's associational data, and I was wanting to hear sort of clinical impressions from people who use them.
I mean, I've done a pretty deep, in prep for this, obviously pretty deep dive, and I was fairly unimpressed by the evidence that shows massive increases in suicidal ideation. I think you've always got to look at the numbers needed to treat and the numbers needed to harm and net benefit. And I think I'd be much more concerned about the muscle loss and the bone loss than the evidence for suicidal ideation from what the studies appear to show. But others in the room may have more expertise on that than I do.
Just super quick, I mean, the graph that both Dr. Unwin and I showed from the 200,000 person database, mostly males because it was from the VA, showed less suicidality, less depression. So we hear, I think it's unknown, right? But You're going to have one study showing one thing, something else. Then that's why we have meta-analyses and systematic reviews.
Was there any phenotyping in that at all, so that maybe there's
No,
one
I mean,
group
this is just a
that shows
database.
higher
It wasn't differentiating, who was diabetic, who was obese. Certainly didn't differentiate food addiction. But you as a clinician or health coach or dietitian, I mean, I think we if they're, very vulnerable, yeah, I mean, like no matter what we do with them, we're going to have a good support system around them. I think that's where the rubber meets the road, is in the clinic, one-on-one.
And let that just be another source of data. I liked what you said about clinical experience, because I listened to the weather person. They're not very good in my area, is where I live, and so I listened to the prediction, and then I also look out the window and see if it's raining. So if you're listening to these studies, they've never seen it, and you're seeing it in your practice, like 1 or 2 events, this is not something to ignore. And for so long, I used to be, well, it's not in the books. And then my patients come in and say, you told me it wasn't that drug, but I stopped the drug and my side effect went away, but it wasn't in the book. So that balance between the clinical studies, of course, if they took away all serious psychiatric illness in the clinical trials, of course you're not going to see suicidality. No one was near the edge, right? So if you're seeing this, don't ignore it. I don't know why 25 years ago, 2 patients of mine lost over 50 pounds, and I said, this is not a random event. It's not lightning hitting, it's just they did the exact opposite of what I was teaching. So that I want to say that you might be seeing things that are real and actually maybe important.
Thanks.
Hi there. I just want to say thank you for the talks today. They were really brilliant.
Just
really
introduce yourself briefly.
Riva De Winter. I'm not a doctor yet, so excuse my naive question, but I'm a second-year biochemistry student at Worcester University. Okay. So it's kind of building on from the question before, which was about skeletal muscle mass loss with the GLP-1s. So I think you mentioned a comparison with bone density loss between bariatric and GLP-1s, and you said there was a difference there. So my question is, could this just be through nutrition, like deprivation? People are eating a lot less. Is this why they're losing skeletal muscle mass? Or is there some other cellular effect happening that might be, something that could affect smooth muscle, cardiac muscle? I'm thinking about other effects in muscle that may be problematic in the future.
I could let Eric take, but in reading the paper, they talked about some of the bone resorption, bone remodeling effects of the medication, as well as rapid weight loss. So I think you'd really have to talk to like an endocrine researcher about what is the mechanism of the bone loss, comparing the 2 methods of weight loss. And to me, it's, as a GP, I'm a GP, protect the people that are losing weight from muscle and skeletal bone loss. So I'm just in the clinic with them. So anyone who's getting bariatric surgery or using these meds, we need to protect. And it's not like they're 2 different conversations. Protecting your bones is protecting your muscles, because good muscles pull on bones. Everything we know to be true about maintaining muscle mass and bone loss are parallel. They're not. And then check them for thyroid, make sure their vitamin D is good, all the other medical things, we would make sure that they have good, healthy bone metabolism.
Yeah, my primary worry is just through drug versus non-drug interventions. You're using a drug, there's probably going to be off-target effects. If muscle loss is one of them and it's differential between drug and non-drug, is that also going to start affecting things like smooth muscle and causing heart complications, especially when people are going on for like 2 years and they're taking off that restriction? You're looking into people using it much more long term, so small effects can
We see that in anorexia, so I think we're seeing that now with the orthorexic people getting these drugs, but no one's studying them. But that would terrify me, people with BMIs of 20 taking these meds, because we know that's how people with eating disorders, they die of cardiac problems. So like, again, back to medical ethics, how those people are getting those drugs terrifies me, because they should be controlled substances, in my opinion. And you all know what controlled substances is? Meaning, like, there is a FDA regulatory control well, Eric Westman's giving this stuff out like metformin. You know, what's Eric? I mean, we saw that. I live in the opiate highway of West Virginia. You know, they started looking at doctors' practices. Why is this one doctor's practice giving out all these drugs? And then, you know, the FDA went and the DOJ, Department of Justice, went down and shut them down, right? Because that was a medical violation. We're seeing that now with GLP-1s, at least in my opinion, and same level almost.
Can I just comment? I'm not prescribing those, so that was sarcasm. It doesn't work well on this stage.
I thought it was humbleness. I got confused.
Can I just say, if you're doing active research, don't assume anyone else is doing it. So here, the world's experts in Baton Rouge, Eric Ravison, I spoke at his research place 25 years ago. Research place. It's like the Taj Mahal of research for obesity. In their study on metabolic adaptation on tirzepatide, cell metabolism, 2025, you just commented on this. They never measured ketones. It's not in there. It's not in any study of the drug because, we don't use ketosis. Sarcasm. They have to be. They have to be in ketosis, and yet nobody measured it. So if you're measuring ketones and you're on a GLP-1, it's a case study, which is really ironic and terrible. No, everyone's in ketosis, until proven otherwise, and because it would be thought of as a detrimental thing for the company, they didn't even measure it in these. So please measure it, and that might even be a protective element for the muscle loss.
Yeah,
getting back to ketosis and cardiac muscle, and actually they may have the protective effect in there without knowing it. Oh, that's right, SGLT2 inhibitors cause ketosis, but a diet can't be good. That's sarcasm. Oh, I'm not being humble. God, David.
1 out of 2.
Yeah. I've got a sort of supplementary question. So when I go to the big diabetes events, there's all the money and the big pharma there. So I go and question the pharmaceutical representatives. So I went up recently and I was saying to them at the GLP stall, we'll call it, and I was saying, are you worried about the muscle loss at all? You know, I don't know much about these drugs, but are you worried about it? And they said, well, no, because actually, obviously, and this is kind of slightly true, if you weigh 5 stone less, climbing the stairs is actually a lot less effort. And you will lose probably some muscle on the thighs because moving around isn't the hard work that it was. So what I don't know is what weight loss can you expect? Sorry, what muscle loss can you expect with a 5 stone weight loss? And what would be beyond that? And I think that's an interesting question. But the pharma people are defending themselves at the moment with, of course, you will lose some muscle because you're not carrying that weight. And there may be something in that. I don't know the answer to this unless one of you do. But I think that's the question, is what would you lose with the weight loss anyway? And what is pathological muscle loss? Because I don't know the answer to that. So just add that in.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything? Have you done some research in the area then?
No, I've actually chosen my research project, but I'm doing beta-hydroxybutyrate, looking at it in leukemia cells to see whether it inhibits growth and respiration. So I would do that. I might change it now. But I wanted to say to David as well, when you said you tried to get the drugs and said that you were, 120 kilos, did you say you were?
Yeah.
My friend actually got it online and she said she was massively overweight. And when you said they asked you to send a photograph, she sent a picture of when she was pregnant.
Yeah.
So you know, people are getting around these things and it's so worrying. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I'm apologising on behalf of my profession here
but come on, it's good business to have more people. It's that fiduciary relationship, the ethics thing that we were taught, that you would have to have a relationship with a patient, and you know, the new generation of doctors who have just learned. Well, I'd love to talk to a few who just learned about doing medicine on Zoom. You know, they're missing out on a lot of data, and that slippery slope of. I think a lot of times it works just fine, but how many do you want to say is okay to not diagnose correctly? And the company would say that that's fraud. So if you came back and said, see, I got this, and I had a bad outcome, they'd say, well, you fraudulently sent in a photo. It's not our. See, that's the business arm's length. It's wrong. You know. So don't expect a company to take responsibility.
So there are quite a lot of us in my profession agitating about this, and we've complained to the regulators. We have our own regulator, and they are tightening the rules because it absolutely has become a Wild West. I mean, it's not the majority of my profession, in some defence of my profession, but it's a small percentage that destroy it for everyone. But they are tightening up the regulations, so I think it'll never be perfect, but it will be better. Yeah, it's a huge risk. Dish this stuff out. People carry on eating what somebody described as shit. You just eat half as much shit. But then you're not getting nutrition. You're just getting fewer calories. You're not supporting your metabolism.
Yeah, so the engine isn't running smoothly. It would be like you have less in the hood. Anyway, you're carrying less stuff in your car, but the car isn't running properly.
I think it answers...
Bonnet, excuse me.
I think, David, in answer to your question, I think normal weight loss studies, I think the norm is somewhere around 20%. Others might know more about that. So you're looking at potentially twice as much loss of lean tissue with the GLPs. So not good.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Anya Agono. I'm a Tier 3 weight management dietitian, so fellow dietitian. My question is around the ultra-processed foods. So in my clinic, as a clinician, I see patients pretty much daily. So these are the patients that GPs refer to us. So my average patient is between 40, 50, 60, 70 BMI. So I see really complex conditions, and binge eating is one of them. And obviously that's something we're able to diagnose, but I'm sure we see a lot of ultra-processed food addictions, which are obviously undiagnosed. So my question is, as a practicing clinician working for NHS, the big thing for me is public health collaboration, looking to roll out the ultra-processed food addiction, so that, you know, what can I do, or what can we do together to get that to all those patients. I mean, our waiting list for the service is 18 months. We've got about 1,200 patients to be seen in our service just alone in Southwest. So thank you. So the question is essentially, what can we do to roll that ultra-processed support for patients? Thank you. Sorry for the really long-winded question.
It's so lovely to hear that question. It really is. And thinking about people with ultra-processed food addiction who are presenting with excess weight, I mean, it'd be my dream to eventually work there. But I always saw it as it would be great to have something like Liberate in Tier 3, and then they may need to go on to bariatric surgery. But if that's to have that in the first place, to rule out everything first. How do we get it into the... Well, we exchange emails, phone numbers, everything, and then we start talking, and we get Sam involved because he's very clever at that sort of to get it into to the NHS. That was the primary goal, to be able to start putting it out there to people. One of the things we didn't talk about in the study that we've done was the binge eating results. We saw that there was really good changing in binge eating symptoms, to the point that we got an amended ethics to be able to collate the rest of the data from groups that we've done since the study, to be able to put that in a different paper. So that's going to be coming out soon, but in short, it's very promising for those with binge eating and ultra-processed food addiction. So it's very promising.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm looking forward to catching up.
Yes.
We're going to, so after our conference in September, we're going to be launching some healthcare professional training, which will give people the basics in how you do the screening, how you have that conversation, what initial tips and tricks you can give people, because there's a lot, like David does loads in his, he manages all his own patients with ultra-processed food addiction. So we're going to try and roll that out. So and if you come to the conference, you'll get a discount for the healthcare professional training.
Just speaking really to the clinicians in the audience. So I never found a single ultra-processed food addict in 25 years, not one. So I completely believed they didn't exist. If you don't look, you will not find.
You don't know what you didn't know.
And now in every clinic I do, I'm finding 2 or 3 brand new ones. But it's really not complicated, actually. You don't even, I hesitate to say, need Jen's craved thing. I'm just saying to people, well, you've been gaining weight and losing it a lot, you know, in the last 20 years. Do you think food addiction could be a factor? Most people know. Many of them say definitely. Most of the general public do not think that food addiction is a made-up nonsense. Most of us know somebody. So I'd say start one way is just for clinicians to be curious and start, because maybe as a model it fits almost anything else. It's a better model, and sometimes it can be a very useful conversation and a start even in primary care.
Just one tiny addition is that when we recruited for our study, we just did it on social media and said, do you think you're addicted to certain foods? You know, this is what it might look like. And certainly in our British sample that came through, 100% did screen positive for food addiction on craved. So people do, if you ask the right questions, they just know it. They know it's them. They're not making it up.
I don't know if you've had the same experience, but when I was practicing in the NHS and I was asking the questions about whether or not someone could be food addicted, I was met with 2 responses. Either they'd break down in tears, absolutely, yeah, and grown men in their 60s as well. I've been covering up this for years. Nobody's ever asked me, you know, and they find relief in that, then they can start working with it. Or complete anger. They slam the door as they go out the room and you're like, oh dear, there's a complaint. 3 months later they come back and they go, you figured it out, but I wasn't ready to address that. But then you can start working with it. So just asking, it's really helpful. It plants that seed.
Thanks again, everyone.
So I got involved and met the carb addiction, sugar addiction, ultra-processed food clinicians, not because they necessarily liked the keto diet. It's just that it overlaps complete elimination of the addictive substance. So in my history of smoking cessation, one of the time-honored ways to quit smoking is called cold turkey. You cut all of the cigarettes out, there's a withdrawal syndrome, and it's over, right? So what I teach, where you could even use a carnivore diet, and what it is the ultimate elimination diet. You're eliminating you're eliminating gluten, you're eliminating sugars, you're eliminating ultra-processed foods. Remember, it's a rose by any other name. It's a low-carb diet by any other name, and the idea of one-on-one with the patient, sorry, I lost you, but you explain this and you say, it just takes a day for these cravings to go. And now I know it's not for everyone, but this is the pitch. It just takes a day for you to stop the cravings. And of course you give oodles of sugar-free things to get people over the sweet cravings. Actually, I've helped people lose hundreds of pounds just using a low-carb diet. And part of it is the instruction, the pitch, if you will. And by golly, there's a new textbook that shows everything. And
the placebo effect.
Well, it's placebo, but it's also, one person came back and said, "My, you're confident with that." And I said, "Yeah." So with the confidence of giving a prescription drug, you doctors or dietitians, you can say this will work. If you don't instill that, who's going to follow what you do? Especially if you came to this with, well, it was hard for me. No, we're not talking about you, doctor. We're talking about this patient who's struggling with giving up cigarettes, giving up sugar. So get rid of all of it.
Just our colleague has disappeared into the audience, but I think there were two things that I would specifically, so wherever you are, can you wave at me? I would add that we can all work on this together. One is support Jen and her attempts to try and get food addiction officially classified, because until it's officially classified, it doesn't really exist. We all know it does, but officially it doesn't exist. So follow Jen, buy a copy of her book, Fork in the Road.
Well, but it sounds like the clinicians, with the organizations, it doesn't exist, but with the patients, they know.
Absolutely. But
so you don't have to wait.
Of course, but if we can achieve this official classification in the classification of diseases, then I think that's a game changer. So that's one thing.
Then it won't be served in hospitals, it won't be served to school children because it's recognised as an addictive substance. That's the dream, isn't it?
The other thing is, the other thing is, everyone here, if you're not already involved in the public health collaboration, please get involved. We pride ourselves on being non-hierarchical. It's not about clinicians, it's about human beings. And we would love all of you who, if you feel that you could do a bit more and be involved in any way whatsoever, please approach any of the trustees or Sam or any of the crew. We would love to have you more involved as ambassadors, how I started out. We will ultimately, those of us who are trustees will be retiring after a second term, so we need to think about that. So please, with open arms, we'll welcome any level of interest that you'd like to bring to us. Okay. Oh, hello. Sorry, Sam. This lady was waving at me at the back. So.
Sorry. Sorry, I'll get this out properly. I was in hospital last year, and I believe that I was victimized because I refused to take the cholesterol drug from them. One of the reasons being that they just told me it's because it's in the guidelines, that's why I've got to take it. I refused, and I think I was picked on because I did that. And now I'm a mother of a doctor, which I'm the worst mother for a doctor, but never mind, I ask a lot of questions. What I want to ask you, you mentioned about, as a patient, I've got a right to refuse medication, and I do it based on being informed properly. What's it like for a doctor? What could or would happen to a doctor who, with the ethics, decides, I'm not going to prescribe this drug because I don't believe in the harm it could do to a patient? Where does that doctor go if that happens? And just what's this one last thing? And I saw a consultant at the hospital, and I said to her that I do low carb. She didn't say anything to me, but she wrote to my GP and said, I've told her to change her. No, she wrote to my GP and said she needs to change her diet. That's the responses I get. Where do I go with all of this madness?
We've got the perfect answer. Come on, David.
Hello. That's such an intelligent question, so interesting. How is it for the doctor? Because that's what I'm doing all the time. But actually, you deal with it together. Because part of informed consent is I'm setting out for my patients the pros and the cons of medication. And then we make joint decisions together with the patient. And then I document. We set out the pros and the cons of the statins. For this particular patient, she decided that she didn't wish to have them. And that's joint decision making. And that is respectable, and on the whole, that's ethical. As long as we have truly set out the disadvantages and the advantages, and that person makes a decision. It's all about informed consent, and that we should each have the information to make a shared decision with the doctor. Just a supplementary on this, it's interesting in the health service that there's a massive difference between informed consent for a surgical procedure and for starting lifelong medication. So if you're going to have a wart removed off your head, you have to sign. They go through, well, it could go infected and you could die this way and that way and the other way. But, you know, as a GP, I can start any lifelong medication without any informed consent. And I think that's morally really peculiar, that we have a double standard, lifelong medication, no discussion. Surgery, it's written discussion. And of course, as the gentleman asked, sooner or later there are going to be complaints. There's the one in America. Because I do think we have a problem with informed consent for medication. The quality is not good enough, and we're letting people down. So I decide together with my patient, using my expertise and their life experience, and usually the patient and I agree, and then I just document it, and I've never had a problem.
Okay. I just want to say, I was at the conference last year, and I just wanted to thank the different doctors I met, who I spoke to, including Anthony Shafee, who helped me last year when I took ill. I just want to say thank you to those doctors I watched on YouTube, including Dr. Westman, because that's what got me through the hospital treatment. Even though I was being picked on, I was standing up for myself. And I was just watching, you even more.
Guys, I need to move on. Sorry, Eric. I don't know if we can quickly take both your questions and see if we can get very quick answers.
All right. Hello. My name is Norbert Jacek. I'm a GP practicing in Northern Ireland. First of all, it was very hard to say anything after that. This lady and her experience, but I wanted to say really thank you on behalf of GPs and practitioners for actually your effort to put things into the guidelines, like nice guidelines for diabetes, for example. That's tremendous. That's a big difference for the doctors actually, because we have something to actually support our view if we want to promote low carb diet, for example. But my question was maybe quickly about GLP-1 as well. Of course, I understand this is a very important group of drugs. I've been using this for my patients as well. However, of course, I'm also very anxious about this kind of widely use of these medications. I would say even like self-medicating more or less, because the doctors have very little control over it.
I'm going to have to rush you, sorry.
Sorry. So my question is, GLP-1s would increase insulin level. Why, on the other hand, actually, low insulin level is a good sign of a good metabolic health. How would you explain that paradox? Because on one hand, GLP-1s can be promoted as kind of beneficial medication, but on the other hand, if they're increased insulin
we've got
level.
the question.
Thank
so
you.
I'm going to take the next question, and if one person can designate themselves who wants to answer that one while we're taking the next question.
I could answer
Thank
that
you.
one in 30 seconds.
We'll come back to it. Let's hear the other question, and then.
Hello, hi, my name is Ali Lawati. I'm a fellow at Barts Health in Diabetes and Endocrinology. And just to brag, I've been keto for 23 years. So I've been using keto with my patients back home since 2016. So my question is just about GLP-1s, which I've been using a lot. And so in the beginning, I used to use microdosing just because we didn't have enough. And now this is becoming a thing, and microdosing is being studied. So just a question on the effects.
So something on insulin resistance, and something on microdosing. Who wants to go?
Yeah, the insulin is, and David Ludwig actually published on this, area under the curve. So yes, the incretin effect with the GLP-1s, it enhances your insulin production with a meal, but you're eating less. So you're not eating all day, you're not eating the same amount. So even though you are secreting insulin at the appropriate times with the incretin effect of the med, the 24-hour insulin production, and it's probably working at some level, maybe a little bit on the fat oxidation. You know, if they have the right support, they're becoming more insulin sensitive. So their overall insulin exposure is less. It is a paradox, but the big picture is less insulin overall.
Microdosing?
I can comment just a touch on microdosing, because what the hell does it mean is the question, because yeah, none of us know what that means. Is it so we were doing cost-effective care by taking an 8 milligram GLP-1 pen because they couldn't afford, and dialing 0.25 into that, which is 9 clicks which saves them a lot of money, so they count the clicks. And some on their own are doing 4 clicks, you know, but like what homeopathy is like maybe just a little bit of nothing. So I think you have to be very specific. But yes, I think the minimum effective dose of anything. So if we can give while they're getting support, you know, 0.125 semaglutide, and it's helping and you're treating their food addiction. But I think as a clinician, it's awesome. Just, you know, individual results may vary. You always want to do the minimum effective dose, but the term microdosing, when you hear it on social media, I just roll my eyes. I don't know what that means. I really don't.
I'm going to wrap. What we do in my practice, we start people on half their minimum dose, and I say, take 1 dose, phone me in 2 weeks. And we're often finding that we never get beyond that dose, and we're not using it weekly. We're saying maybe take it every 10 to 14 days. If you could just do all the other things to increase incretin secretion naturally, which we haven't had time to go into, and you can add just enough GLP to take away the food noise, I think it's magic, and you minimize the side effects. So I need to wrap. But I'm just going to complete with this, because I think it talks to, I mean, David in particular has thought a lot and hard about prescribing and the ethics of prescribing. So next time you're in front of your GP, he wants to ask you, he's prescribing a statin or a GLP, here's the questions I want you to ask, right? Number 1, what's the numbers needed to treat? Number 2, what's the numbers needed to harm? And number 3, what's the effect on all-cause mortality? Thank you very much.